Okay, all set.
All right, good evening, everybody. Today is Wednesday, May 1st. It's the monthly meeting for the school building committee. First thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make a motion. We're gonna approach this agenda slightly out of order because we had our pre-meeting, the working group meeting, and it made sense to do the agenda out of order. So I make a motion to go ahead, and Jeff, you can, or Mike, you guys can set the agenda whatever way we were going to approach it. So I make a motion that we take this meeting out of shown order.
Yeah, so to Rich's point, in your meeting packet you received, some of you yesterday, some of you this morning, just because of the size of the link, there was an agenda item there. And so what we've done is to prioritize it in terms of need. You know, as we've talked about in your last few meetings, there's a lot of content to get through between now and the end of June, when you would likely make your recommendation to move forward to the next stage. And so we have a rather full agenda to get through tonight, and there's a potential that we want to schedule a new meeting that's not on the books yet for 2 weeks from tonight, depending on the overall length of tonight's discussion and how much stuff we don't get through. There's a couple items that we're going to table and get to at that next meeting. And so with that, I'm gonna jump right into it. We have additional team members here you might not have seen before, or maybe seen from the past project. Chris Bussin is obviously here to lead the TAP-A team, but Caesar is also another principal with TAP-A, is here to help with the sustainability presentation. And then Wayne Matson is the mechanical engineer supporting the TAP-A team. And so those are the new faces in the room. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chris to make the presentation. Our agenda for tonight, including the packet, is to recap the public forum, and that's where we're going to start. Then we'll get into sustainability and energy efficiencies and have a discussion about the options out there in terms of, you know, all electric, gas boilers, geothermal, all those types of options that are out there. And we'll go through those systems, and then Chris will pick back up and talk about the design options, and most notably looking inside the renovation portion of the building, really a deeper dive than what you guys did at PDP. PDP was the high level view. Now that we're in the PSR stage, really start to look into the building, look at the walls, look at the makeup of the building. And with that, I'll turn it over to Chris to kind of take it from here.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. All right. I'm seeing that you can see this slideshow, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So that was the agenda Jeff just described. We do have some hopefully desired outcomes. Those aren't required, but those, you know, those are kind of strategies that we want to get to during this meeting. But to kick it off, we have the public forum recap. I think there was maybe close to 25 or 30 people there. It was a good night. We had a lot to discuss. We went over all the critical components for the project. What you see on the screen here is when David Stephen from New Vista goes through the educational visioning process with the team that he's been doing that with over several sessions. He sort of redid some of that for this community, for the folks who were in attendance. And there's three kind of key categories that he goes through. The first one is, I don't know if they're in this order, but the first one I'm showing tonight is the community priorities. And so this gives you a sort of a glimpse into, at least from the opinion of those who came, what might be important in the facility or priorities from the community to consider. And you can kind of see the key components here: community integration, outdoor engagement, budget conscious design is a sort of a big one, site circulation, welcoming environment, and then cultural or recreational spaces. And you can read the finer text there in black that sort of gives some comments that were made, but these were all things that were submitted in real time in the session, and it gives us sort of some rails to look at the building through or with or on. And so that's the community priorities. The next one was educational priorities. So we wanted to get through what educationally we should happen. And we did that through the lens of the portrait of a graduate that is already a thing for the high school, and sort of expanded on that a little bit. And these themes came up where it was essentially student-centered learning was important, and inclusive learning environments. But then we talked a little bit about career preparation and sort of community engagement. And I think that those things are sort of hallmarks in the community, and things that we want to make sure we continue to foster within the building. And these themes also were sort of coming to the top, or to, into the conversation within the other group of educational visioning and things that we did on the side. So it's good to see that cross-pollination. And then what has come up a lot is security and safety in all of the meetings. And we want to make sure we do that well, again, anywhere we can. All right, so then we talked about architectural priorities, and we led them through, or David led them through, a series of slides that showed different ways that we can think about the project in architectural terms. I think this future-proof design is probably one of the bigger ones, and we need to keep that in mind, that it's not only a nice to have, but the MSBA wants us to build a building that could conceivably be there for the next 50 years. And then, the whole conversation around flexible learning spaces, because how we did education as children is different than how it happens now, and it'll certainly change over time as well. Again, the theme of community engagement, so making spaces that the community can use, safety and sustainability. People make comments like solar and geothermal, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that later on tonight. And then we get to functional and affordable design as sort of the end of this, and technology integration. And we just need to make sure that we can get everything done, but we don't want to over design. And so part of this process was, you can see in this picture that we had these boards, and we printed up the current options that are being considered, and we put in front of them, because we came into the PSR with one renovation scheme and one new option. Those are kind of set in terms of what we bring forward into the PSR, but we have a number of these ad reno options. And so we were going to try to get feedback from those in attendance on what they thought were, what ad reno option was resonating with them the most. And so we brought with us the 4 options that you all had asked us to carry into the PSR, which were AR1, AR3, AR4, and AR4A. You can see in these pictures where the sticky notes landed on, in terms of which option was resonating with the people in attendance the most. And clearly AR4 has the most, AR4A has 2, and then AR1 has 3, but AR3 had 0 interest from those in attendance. And I think amongst this group, it also has not been as highly favored as some of the other options. And so part of the exercise tonight, and what I was hoping we could maybe have a discussion about, is any of the committee members who were in attendance, who maybe Bob or any others want to talk about anything from the community forum that resonated with them, or things that need to be communicated from post-forum discussions. I want to give some airtime for that if there is any. And then also, based on the community forum feedback, this group's opinions and feelings, and where we need to go for PSR, are we at a phase where we can officially eliminate AR3 from the conversation and just start to focus in on the last remaining 3 addition renovation schemes? And so with that, I think I'll pause and let Rich guide you through that discussion for a couple minutes.
Hey, Chris, that'd be great. Thank you. Could you do us a favor and pull up AR3 just so the folks could look at it, please?
Yep. It's later on here.
And could you just describe AR3 you just added the block for the middle school on that? That was the.
Yeah, it was basically the only addition was the middle school. And then the difference between that AR4 and AR4A was adding not only the middle school, but adding a cafeteria and gym. And then AR4A was just adding the gym. AR3 only adds classroom space, not any other functional space.
Great, thank you. So why don't we, Bob, what is your thought on that? Since it's, it's your guys' school, what's your take on if we limited the AR3?
I think Bob's at
Oh,
FinCom.
sorry. Okay.
Yeah,
How about Mark or Anna?
Yeah, I think we can step in and talk about that for a second. I think, I think we as a group, in the meetings that we've had, I think that was some of the feedback that we had too, was the idea that we were really looking towards trying to expand the footprint a little bit and separate middle school and high school and potentially be able to put a new gym on the building and be able to use some of that existing space for, adaptive PE that we already have and things like that. So I think just looking at the designs, hearing what the community had to say and hearing some of the thoughts of our committee, I think the lean has been more towards 4 or 4A. So I think from our perspective, and I don't know if John or Anna or Terry have anything to say about it, but I think it would make sense, I think from our end, and it seems like that's some of the community pulse too.
Yeah,
All right.
well said. Yeah, I think the priority on the gym that Mark mentioned and thinking about some of those shared spaces between the two buildings, that the AR4 and 4A were, heavily favored. And it was more different. AR1 is more different. So AR3 just kind of fell through the middle and didn't really bring what we were looking for.
Terry, did
Thanks,
you want
Mark.
to say something?
no, I just very briefly, Bob indicated no particular interest in AR3. I think Mark expressed it well, that, 4 is probably the preference of the administration at this point.
Okay, great. All right, so we have enough people here we should actually vote on this just because this is an important decision. Unless there's any other comments. All right, so I make a motion that we remove the AR3 option from the process. And I'm gonna do it by roll call. So Denise?
I'm gonna
You
second
need a
your
second,
motion.
Rich.
Rich.
Oh, sorry, second.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
sorry.
gonna second your motion. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Motion's
and-
made and seconded, sorry. And Denise?
Aye.
Okay, Diane?
Aye.
Jeremy?
Yes.
John? You're muted. I'll take that as an aye.
Yeah.
Thanks, John. And I'm also an aye, so that motion carries. All right, Chris. it's
Thanks,
up to you.
Rich.
Yep.
Yep, thanks. Thanks everybody for helping us make progress. So I'll carry on here. Let me share PowerPoint. Okay. All right. My screen is back for everybody, I assume, so we'll keep going. All right, so we'll jump right into sustainability and energy, and hopefully you all were able to get the documents that we sent over in preparation for this. It probably is a lot of reading, but hopefully gives you a good grounding of things that are out there and available, but also a little bit of sort of foundation for what we're trying to talk about tonight. Let me turn this air conditioner off. Apologize for that. It's very loud. Okay, so we want to just start talking about sustainability and energy, not to push an agenda. TAPE and Griffith and Berry don't have an agenda aside from getting you the best building that we can give you, that sets you up for whatever it is that will come in the future, and also advising you on all the applicable codes and ramifications that we can see sitting here today in it's May 1st of 2024. And so that's our agenda. We're not looking to push anything on you. We just want to give you the facts and the details and let you make decisions and guide you through that process and be with you as we can. Setting the groundwork, I'm sure you all are familiar with this, but we want to make sure the community around you as they watch this, the recap of this meeting and see these slides on the internet that are on the website, that the Millis is a green community, which means you're already taking steps to be sort of above and beyond. That's all the green communities on this map. And then at this point, a lot of communities are in that. But what that really means for you is that you cannot partake in the regular energy code that is on the books. And I'm sorry, is there a comment?
No, John just has his mic on, John Engler.
Oh, okay, sorry. So really what it means for us is that at the very minimum, Millis is in this sort of center category, which is the updated stretch code. It was recently updated and it is in effect. And then all communities are able to opt into a specialized code, which is essentially trying to get projects to a more net zero operationally, and that's what that code is about, and other things. But so we're going to come back to this slide. Cesar is going to talk a little bit more about this stuff in a moment to talk about how this actually applies in sort of different pathways.
Chris,
but
could I just jump in for 1 minute? And
Yep,
I just
sure.
want to go back to, part of the reason why Chris was explaining that there's no specific agenda from their design group is that we also wanted to explore the option of using a traditional heating source in the project. We want to look at both sides. We want to be, cognizant of the fact that, we want to be green. However, there's also cost implications, and we want to make sure that whatever we pick, we're all looking at it with eyes wide open. So that's kind of why he was going at that from a, it's a discussion at this point in time.
Yep. Okay. All right. So basically what we want to do is talk through a few things on how do you get there. First thing is these all build on each other. So the first real kind of basic decision level is, are we going towards some kind of standardized system like LEED or CHIPS for schools, which is a collaborative for high performance schools. And if you want to get to, well, I'll just kind of go there. To get to this LEED silver level, you need the 50 to 59 points. This is a sort of mock scorecard that we bring up just to show you where some of those points come from. You have everything from, transportation, sites, water, materials, environmental, air quality, stuff like that. And then really the big one down here is energy and atmosphere. And there's a lot of credits in that. And they all formulate into a pool of points that gets you towards 50 to 59. The reason I bring this up is because in order to achieve additional reimbursement percentage points from the MSBA, you have to start with a baseline of meeting LEED silver. And then the new version of the LEED requirements builds on top of that. And so if you don't at least do this, you can't then go for other things, which I'll explain now. And that's that the MSBA offers an additional 3% reimbursement for using the opt-in specialized code, which is what I talked to you about a second ago, where we have right now Millis is in the sort of stretch code because of the green communities, but then you can do the opt-in. And if you do that, you can get up to an additional 3% reimbursement there. And then you can also get an additional 1% reimbursement for achieving high performance on indoor air quality.
Hey, Chris, just
yeah.
on the enhanced stretch code. So
Mhm.
that, with that would require, it would almost be a net zero building, correct?
It would be net zero ready. I don't think it requires, I need to look up what the requirement is for renewables, but it's essentially net zero ready, yes.
So what that would be for just for the general public is that means that would be additional insulation requirements, air sealing, ventilation. There's a bunch of things that you would need to spend money on in order to get that 3%. So just so everyone's clear on
Correct.
what's going on with that.
And I believe, Wayne, correct me if I'm wrong, chime in here, but if you do go for the opt-in specialized code, it does essentially mean you can't do fossil fuel systems. Is that correct?
That's exactly right. Yeah, if you go opt-in, fossil fuels are forbidden except for under one specific circumstance, which schools, it doesn't apply to schools, right?
So said conversely, if you have a desire to do some form of fossil fuels, which again, we're agnostic on that for this conversation, then you would not be able to do the opt-in specialized code, which means you would not be able to get the 3%. And so it's all follows on, right? So just trying to paint the picture. Rich, I think, correct me if I need anything as we go.
Nope, that's good. Just so everyone knows what's going on.
Yeah. So this is what that looks like on the MSBA's policy. So the one on the left is no additional reimbursement points. That's the sort of baseline policy arrangement there. And then the updated, or the one on the right, is showing you the potential grab for more points. And this basically gives you the way they describe it, and you use the LEED indoor air quality points to get to that, or you can use chips. They're not telling you which one to use, but suffice it to say, this is the description for that. And I think if you guys need this in print somewhere, it'll be in this presentation, and you can refer to it there, or it's on the MSBA's website, and I'm sure we can provide links to some of that on the project website. So that's setting the base point. And then from there, we have other ways to produce incentives or other rebates on the building. And those really lie within Eversource, or everybody's familiar with the IRA funds that the federal government is pushing out. And all of those are ways to explore different ways to partner with Eversource Mass Save. And I think the big thing here is that there's basically 3 paths you can go on for Eversource, which are for new buildings, like whole building approaches, or major renovations. And the first path is a sort of net zero low EUI building. The EUI is an acronym that means energy use intensity. And this was a new thing, and sort of now it's, because of all these energy code changes, is sort of becoming less talked about and being replaced by this energy modeling effort called TEDI, which is I'll let Cesar and Wayne tell you about that in a minute, but that's another acronym. And that's a different way to look at the building. The EUI looks at the systems and how they perform, and the TEDI looks at the envelope and the building sort of, the box that the systems are in, and tries to get things more efficient there. The path 1 is a really stringent path to do. It has some pretty lucrative returns on rebates and incentives if you can achieve it. But really, for the K-12 projects, it requires an EUI of 25 or better, or lower. That you want lower EUI is better. And just for a case of comparison, the box on the left is what the final energy model for the Clyde Brown produced, which was a projection at the time. I think the building is actually performing a little bit higher than this, but at the time, the final proposed model was showing 27 EUI, which means your new building or anything to get into path one would have to be even more energy efficient or more energy conscious in terms of the usage than what we were able to achieve with the Clyde Brown. And that's even harder in a high school than it is in an elementary school, because high schools are used much more broadly typically than elementary schools. And so so just little points of clarification there. The other two pathways are whole building EUI reduction. So you can look at your current building, figure out what the EUI is, and then hit markers just to get down from there. The net zero approach really requires more holistic interventions with thermal envelope and everything like that, and windows. Whole building EUI can probably look at just with equipment and things like that. Then there's the third option, which is sort of a whole building high performance scenario where you can look at renovation components, and they're really trying to look at 3 out of 5 different categories to get you into a very specific thing to get to incentive points. All that to say, you venture into this, you sign on to it, and you do a memo of understanding, and then they do a study and send you back an agreement on what they're going to give you. But I think almost all of these have roadblocks if you aren't going with an all electric system, including these deep energy retrofit system, which is this one in the middle that offers existing buildings the opportunity to get some really big savings if you are going with all electric systems. And I believe you can exclude some kitchen equipment in that. We'd have to work with them on that. And then in your packet that you got, we gave you the Zero Energy Schools Toolkit. Not that we're trying to push that again, but just to give you some inclinations on what's required to get there in the process. So I'll keep going. So one of the ways to get there is using highly insulated envelope, the sort of triple pane windows, all electric HVAC systems. We know that we don't have to push all electric. I'm not really saying that, but it does help you get to these other markers. LED lighting, which these days is pretty much a given everywhere. And then controls for operating efficiencies and things like that. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Cesar, who is on the call to help explain some of these things. He's going to try to explain, I think earlier today or late last night, you would have also received basically a report that he wrote talking about these things, and he's just going to try to go through those in a little bit more detail here to give you some verbal on what you might have already read. But with that, Cesar, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Chris.
Just tell me when to turn the slide.
Yeah. Well, if you saw the report, I don't know if you included every single page of the report. Sometimes it gets a little bit dry and the subject.
Yeah.
But in general terms, and TEDI stands for thermal energy demand intensity, and I guess the difference with the EUI is that kind of the word thermal, where it relates more to the heating load, the heating energy of the space. So in looking at in general, any building, any shelter, anything that is space that has for human habitation, you enclose it and you need to deal with the 4 components: the air, water, vapor, and thermal, which are the exterior elements that you're trying to keep away from, keep out. When I move to the next one. So yeah, air, water, vapor, and thermal. And so to deal with those, you deal with the envelope, improving the envelope via air. You seal gaps to prevent air infiltration. Thermal, you add insulation on the roof and the walls, and improve the window performance. And vapor, that's your vapor barrier, or some kind of element that prevents moisture or water at the particle level moving from one side of the wall to the other, and try to balance the wall to prevent dew point and having issues with condensation.
I was gonna jump in. I was gonna say on your existing building, and I think we have a little snippet from the existing original construction drawings. That wall, that exterior wall is made up of a CMU backup, which is on the inside of the building, and an airspace and a brick veneer. And there is no insulation currently on the existing building.
So basically,
And-
right now, we have an R of like 0 or 1.
You get some
Probably
credit
one,
for the
which
brick.
is it's at least it doesn't conduct. That's something.
Yeah, so
Except
I
for the
think,
windows, but that's a
but
different.
we do know from talking with John and others during our existing conditions surveys and analysis is that when you get a nor'easter on certain parts of the building, it doesn't do a good job of keeping the water or vapor out. So there are deficiencies in the envelope that we need to address if we're going to keep portions of that building, whatever it is. And so where that gets complicated, and Cesar is going to talk about this, I don't mean to steal his thunder, but where that gets complicated is that if you're trying to address, say, a water problem or a vapor problem or something like that in your envelope, but you don't really want to chase it everywhere. Where the code gets you is when you start to get into those repair components, it starts to trigger a whole lot of other things. And so these 4 components are very important to understand and realize what the battle is and what the battle is for. Because when you try to do one and correct a problem that already exists in your envelope or building right now, it automatically triggers you into some other things. And so I'll let Cesar keep going.
Yeah. So you're right, Chris, and always keep in mind those four elements: air, water, vapor, and thermal. In general, when people think about a building and keeping it warm, they think about insulation, but there are other things as important in keeping a very weather-tight envelope. And that's what, when we look at a wall, when we design a wall, an exterior wall, we look at those 4 elements and see, where are our primary barriers? What is our backup? What is each one of these components doing to address the air, water, vapor, and thermal for the envelope? So from the get-go, any addition to this building, any addition, new construction has to meet the latest code, the 225 CMR, which is the stretch code based on the IECC 2021. So any new construction will meet those standards. Then we have here talk a little bit about what Chris mentioned. In this community, like many communities, there are very few communities in
hear
Massachusetts that
it.
are not stretch code.
And I fussed around. Oh, look at this.
So is
Was the meeting
we are
over?
in the stretch code community, so it has
Can you
to
get there?
comply with the
Oh,
stretch code.
I'll get it.
In the
Video was her turn microphones on.
Go ahead, Cesar.
Yeah. So is basically there are for compliance. You can use different. There's one that is performance based, but it doesn't apply to schools, so that it applies only.
That's the top one here, and you can't see it under the red line, but that's performance.
Oh, okay, yeah. So there are 3 paths. Compliance is the one at the top is the one that you just said is It's a performance-based, unfortunately, it is designed for small buildings that are less complicated. Targeted performance is for most buildings, most new construction, and particularly they cite of schools among other building types. So it's kind of mandatory for us to use the targeted performance. And then you have the relative performance, which is different and it doesn't apply. I think that the language is that if any of the other two apply, you could use that third one. But for us, it's a targeted performance, which means compliance with a specific, in compliance with IECC 2021, as well as all the other additional amendments in the Massachusetts Stretch Code. And that includes TEDI. Mentioning before the difference between TEDI and IEUs, both are kind of measure of the energy per square foot in a year. However, the EUIs are more general and includes all kinds of loads. TEDI is geared towards the thermal requirements. Therefore, it has like a more passive approach. It's almost it's kind of like the most efficient energy building is the one that doesn't use energy, right?
Right.
By the same token, say, for example, you have, I'll give an example of a cooler, the one that you take for a picnic with your drinks in there. It's not plugged into anything. It's just based on a well-constructed envelope that maintains the little energy that is in the air based on ice or whatever you have. It keeps it inside for a very long time, and that's called resiliency. So TEDI is kind of a measure of that. And that's what I think is very important, that we start with the envelope to minimize the amount of energy that the building will be requiring later. No matter how efficient the equipment is, you still need energy. But if you improve an envelope, then you start in a much better position. So we talked about, in general terms, about the elements that surround this envelope. Now the envelope is composed of the roof, the walls, the windows, right? The fenestration. We look at starting with the roof, and in particular, as I said, with the new building will have to meet everything. With the renovation aspect, the energy code requires that anything that you do beyond just basic repairs will have all the new components have to meet the current code, the 225 CMR. And in practical terms, right? So you have to do that. In practical terms, something during construction is going to happen, a tie-in, a removal of a piece of equipment, and you put a larger roof of piece of equipment, and you need to expand on the openings and all that. Everything that you touch, you disturb, you need to bring up to code. So that's, and because it's a renovation, it actually says that if you don't touch it, you don't need to bring it up to code.
Chris, can I ask you a question? So basically on the building, one of the things we have to do is the roof over. So I think that just kind of answers the question on the roof is going to be replaced, and we're going to do, what is it, R52 on the roof now? What's the new code requirement for the R value?
I think it's we had a 10-inch. We standardized it at 10 inches in our office, which is about R60.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So yeah, it's very high. The code, I think, is slightly below that, but it's because 10 inches is a number that is kind of the standard with what materials are available for taper insulation and all that.
So Rich, I just want to go back on, so some of the challenge with Teddy specifically, and Cesar may get into this in just a minute, when he talks more about the walls, but there's this process called thermal derating. And so you take what in most of our collective knowledge of buildings and all of that, and you say, well, that wall's a R30 or that roof's an R52 or something like that. And then we have to go through a process of derating that R value because of things like thermal bridges or, things that can conduct energy and derate the thermal value of the building. And so we don't really need to go into the calculation, but it's very complicated. And a lot of people you kind of have to do a bit of modeling to understand what the final number needs to be to meet the code of on a Teddy analysis. And so we come up with these systems that say 10 inches seems to work across the board. But when we do the analysis, if we don't touch other parts of the building, we may have to be overly aggressive in other areas to make some modeling work out in different ways. Does that make sense?
No,
what
it
I'm
makes
saying?
sense 100%.
Okay.
Yeah, we've
And-
done
and
that.
You're right, Chris. There in the new code, there are a lot of calculations involved. The derating is one of them. And you need to study every portion of the building and ratios of windows versus walls and all this. And on top of that, I know we all talk about R values. That's what we're familiar with. The new code doesn't. It basically says that you cannot use the tables of the IECC for R values. You have to use the U values. And then you have to take all the components of the wall, and that's how you can calculate the derating. The R value used to be just the amount of insulation that you put on the wall, and that was easy. That was kind of prescriptive. So a little bit different now. Bottom line is that because we have done this before, and just based on experience, intuitively we know, and based on experience, we know that with a 10-inch of insulation, we're going to be on a good position. But you still need to demonstrate via calculations that we meet Teddy. That will come after when we develop the plans.
So Rich, to your point, I think you all know the roof needs to be replaced. We're gonna work with the current solar that's on there and figure out what that implication is for the town, and be prepared to address that through budgeting and other things. But the recommendation here, which I don't think is wildly controversial, but just recommending whatever part of the building we do keep, however much of it that we do keep for renovation, that we go ahead and just consider that a full replacement of the roof, just to reset the life cycle and a common starting point for everything up there. And so that's our recommendation. We can keep going on to the other aspects of the building, but I think there's no probably controversy on that front.
Nope.
But
Nope,
do you-
that 100%. That makes, and that's what I was saying is basically we all agreed that the roof is being replaced. So that means that we're getting 10 inches of insulation, and we're moving on.
Yep. Okay. So we'll go on to the walls. Cesar, if you want to talk about
Mhm.
walls for a second.
Right. So, so for walls, same thing. Chapter 5 of the IECC deals with existing buildings and alterations to existing buildings. So it says that everything that shall comply with code requirements for new construction without requiring the unaltered portions to comply with energy code. However, by code, if the wall is altered or a component is removed so that access to the wall cavity becomes accessible, that portion of the wall will have to comply with energy code. You touch it, you have to you have to fix it with code compliant elements. Right.
So I think, sorry, Cesar, to interrupt. I think
go
where
ahead.
we were coming to on our side of the fence for this, as we think about holistically, this kind of came up today in the working group, is that we know there's going to be components on the outside of the building that will trigger an investigation of scope in this regard, right? So one aspect of this is when we look at, Wayne will talk to you in just a second about systems. If we talk about the removal of unit ventilators to go to a more broad-based mechanical ventilation system with, you know, whatever heating cooling system we decide to use, those unit ventilators will come out and we need to plug that hole with something, and that intervention is going to have to be code compliant. And then you say, well, how much of the wall do you actually have to deal with code wise? Where does it end? Like, where's the end of this intervention? And then you end up with little parts of the building that are new and code compliant and some that aren't. And so I think the challenge that we run into here is effectively running it down so that we can get all of it in, and then code wise making sure that we do that, at the same time acknowledging that the practicality of that work is difficult. And so in the previously mentioned scenario where you have a cavity wall that's block on the inside and brick on the outside with an airspace, and we need to go and increase that to whatever our calculations say we need to increase the insulation value to. You can't just sneak insulation down in the air gap, and you can't, you know, really do much on that. And then the downsides are that really the two options you have is either pull the veneer off the side, or three, you pull the veneer off the side and insulate and then re-veneer. You can, and it came up in today's meeting, we can look at what if we just insulate on top of the brick that's already there and then do another veneer on top of that somehow, and we look at the ramifications of that, or you do it on the inside of the building. And the downside to that is that to achieve the rating that we need, you're going to lose classroom space on already small classroom sizes. And so that just complicates the internal issues that we're battling with renovating this building and keeping it. And so I think what did we land on here, Cesar, was that the recommendation that we have for the walls.
There are different ways of doing things as you just described. I think that in here we were definitely recommending that, and you'll see in, I don't know if we have a picture in this presentation for openings, but you see that in the classroom wings, a good percentage of the facade is glass, is windows. So the amount of brick we're talking about is limited. It could be done either way. It could be done from the inside in areas where, say, for example, we have only one-story building and one-story portion. And if we keep that portion, then it's easier to do from the inside, perhaps. When you have 2 floors, the problem with the code is that you need to demonstrate that you don't have thermal breaks or thermal breaches, and that typically occurs at the floor. That's where it gets tricky, how you create a continuous insulation at the facade, at the floors. So perhaps in that case, it's better to deal with everything from the outside, do a continuous wrapping of the building, of the brick, with new insulation and new cladding. So there's more than one option. But the bottom line is that in terms of practicality, in terms of constructability, if you're going to go around and patch holes with R20 insulation and leave the rest of the wall literally uninsulated, nothing in there, it might be more problematic than to just do the entire area.
Yeah. So Rich and committee, I think what we're getting at here is that if you're going to invest in this building over the life cycle of 50 years with whatever mechanical systems you end up choosing to put in it, our advice and recommendation is that is not that is money well spent only if you address the envelope as well. And so I think what we're saying is we need to do the envelope work We've been carrying that in these cost estimate budget analysis that we did. And I think we need to keep carrying that in. That strategy is that we will, over the course of schematic design, figure out the best way to do that. Whether it's pull the veneer off, put a new thing on, or reskin over whatever is already there. I do think that I do think the strategy will probably end up being based on the outside instead of on the inside, because it's a little less invasive and we can do more on the outside than we can on the inside. But we don't have to solve that right now. I think what we're really just getting at is that the sort of committee just acknowledged somehow that we're gonna have to address the insulation on the walls somehow, some way. And we're carrying that forward in these costing analysis budgets and stuff like that. And so I think that's really, if you want to discuss that or not, we can pause here.
Yeah, why don't we bring that up? I mean, my assumption is, Chris, that that we were gonna do that anyhow. I mean, we needed to do, if there's no insulation, which is what I suspected, to not insulate the building would be silly. So, and especially if you've already carried that number in the analysis, that makes 100% sense to me. So I assume that the committee would agree with that. I can't see anyone other than Diane. John?
Excuse me, I would assume that the new construction obviously would have up-to-date insulation. Is that right or wrong?
Yeah, so I think what we're suggesting is that anything new that we build will definitely have these high performance walls with the multi-layer strategies that we do for new construction. And then this question of variability and decision making is really based around the addition and renovation scope. I'm sorry, the renovation scope, not the addition. That you have some choices to make.
Yeah,
But you feel though that the problem is best based working from the outside, not the inside?
yes, John, they were thinking
yeah.
about the outside versus.
Yeah, as of tonight, I think that because of all, and later in the presentation, you're going to see me go through strategies on what walls we can keep and which ones we can't and stuff like that for the inside. And that's based on the premise that the classrooms are already, somewhat at or near or even undersized to the MSBA's template. They've been indicating that they're willing to work with the town on that. But, if we have to take out an additional 6 inches on the inside of the classrooms to accommodate some kind of insulation strategy for the whole perimeter of the building, that's a lot of square footage that we lose on the inside of the building that we have to make up somewhere, which may, at the end result of that may be that you have to build more square footage, which at a cost of, 6 or what,
But
yeah.
you feel the envelope now has an airspace in it?
It does.
The airspace, is that close to the outside?
Is it closed to the outside?
The airspace?
It's an airspace that is, it's closed by the rain screen veneer that is the brick, but that's not an impermeable, brick is not an impermeable sealed condition.
No, I understand that. I'm just asking, is the airspace closer to the brick or closer to the inside?
Oh, it's right in the middle. It's right in the middle. Like the brick is 4 inches, there's an airspace, and then there's a, I think it's a 4 or 6 inch CMU on the inside. So it's like basically right in the middle.
Okay.
Mike, did you have your hand up? Mike Quinlan?
No, I just wanted to make sure that it was clarified, but Chris clarified it, that the airspace is not insulated, it's open to the air temperature, but it's designed to act as a rain screen to keep the elements out. But water can permeate into that airspace, and there are weep holes at the bottom of the walls to allow the water to exit.
And one of the things also we had talked about in the report was, that the part of the building envelope is if we do external insulation, then we could also air seal it at the same time. So that there's a win-win to that. So I think that makes sense that we should continue on the external insulation.
Yeah. That approach provides you a more holistic approach for the 4 elements that Cesar mentioned earlier. You can address all of them
I was gonna
with
say
that single
that
approach. So
that's what I like about that doing that is that it's a lot easier to achieve the air, water, vapor, and thermal, just literally working from the outside. Right now, as a rain screen, it's only dealing with the water, wind-driven rain, but we don't
and it
know.
doesn't even really do that, Cesar.
And yeah, exactly. Theoretically, when it was built, that's all it was doing. Now it's not dealing with that because materials are porous and perfectly probably degraded by now. And so yeah, I think that it would be easier to deal with that from the outside.
Were there any additional questions on walls or roofs so far? Well, if not, we'll just keep going right on into windows and systems. Is that okay?
Keep going.
Okay. Here we go. All right, so that was walls. We appreciate that. We do. So now I think as of this discussion, we have a strategy for both roofs and walls. And so we'll keep those strategies going into schematic design. And Cesar, I'll just take this since I'm here. But the openings essentially, we need to replace all the windows. That's the Cliff's Notes of it. And by replacing them and achieving the code-based U value, which Cesar mentioned earlier, that everything's based on these U value now, hitting the 0.3 minimum, but actually getting the TEDI analysis and models to work out. This really almost requires, and we've been pushing towards this for a while, not pushing as in it's our agenda item, but like the codes and energy efficiencies have been pushing towards triple glazed systems for a while. And sometimes we've been able to like value engineer that to double glazing on very limited circumstances. But we think on this building, given where the code states are right now, that it pretty much guarantees we're going to be looking for triple glazed insulated glass systems wherever they're at on the building. So that's I think where we're at is you have to hit these this 0.28 or better. The 0.3 was the minimum code base, but the 0.28 is where we're at. And our recommendation is replacing all the windows. I don't suspect this is very controversial, but Rich, if you wanted to discuss that with your committee, we're happy to.
I mean, I think we're gonna be changing the whole exterior envelope anyhow at this point in time. So
okay.
We're gonna have to, because you're gonna have to get the R value up to that. We wouldn't be able to get the thermal break between the existing window because it's filling the opening. So there's no way you can insulate it properly. So we'll have to basically take the windows and put them in a different position. So that kind of answers that question right there.
Right. One thing we'll talk to you about in schematic design and beyond is the idea of operable windows in classrooms. During the pandemic, this became a pretty big sticking point for older schools like yours, that you really wanted operable windows to be able to get that natural ventilation in, things like that. With these modern HVAC systems, again, regardless of how they're operated from a fuel capacity, I think you'll see us recommending something that is dedicated ventilation air to the rooms with 100% dedicated outside air coming in to each room. And then that doesn't get cross-mixed into like room to room to room. On the exhaust side, it goes out of the building, typically through like an energy recovery wheel that, tempers the incoming ventilation air. Again, I'm kind of crossing into Wayne's business here, but that's the next slide. So I'm sort of teeing that up. But the idea that you have openings on the building in recent projects, what we've been doing is putting signs on the wall that say, don't open these windows unless it's these conditions outside. Because if you do, all the hard work we've done for this envelope, all the hard work we've done with the systems, it's literally just dumping it out the window. And so we're trying to train users of the building at the same time. And on some schools, that means that we're not even offering operable windows because we really don't need them. And they really don't, like, there's only a certain number of days in a year in New England that those conditions actually meet. And so that's just to sort of precurse that idea that, you know, windows in buildings are not always the best idea given nowadays where we ventilate differently than we used to. But to talk more about the systems side of this, I'm going to hand it off to Wayne and he'll walk you through. Wayne, just tell me when to change slides.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot, Chris. So this slide, I like to show this slide when I start off my presentation because a lot of what we talk about HVAC systems. A lot of people don't realize that HVAC systems account for 39% of the energy in a typical commercial building, which includes schools. And this pie chart really is information that came from the Energy Information Agency. So you can see that besides my systems, HVAC and lighting, we cover a large portion of the building. So it is pretty important to talk about this. And then so keeping this in mind, Chris, move to the next slide, please. When we go into system types, we don't just arbitrarily pick an HVAC system and say, hey, here's a system that's perfect for your building. We go through a life cycle cost analysis, which is a pretty exhaustive study that compares, that has a lot of metrics: construction costs, energy costs, maintenance, system replacement costs. And then we also factor in rebates and incentives such as the Eversource or the Mass Save, one of those passed, or even the Inflation Reduction Act, which accounts for 30% direct payment reimbursement for geothermal systems. But I got to put a caveat on this one because as enticing as that sounds to say you're getting a 30% back from the IRA for geothermal, this is a rebate you get after construction. So the project still has to fit within a budget before you can build it. And so this is kind of a value that can kind of skew things. But when we do these life cycle costs, besides the costs that go into it, we also evaluate 6 generally accepted good HVAC systems. High efficiency gas fired condensing boilers coupled up with either chilled beams or displacement ventilation. This is kind of a more conventional system, but it's still very efficient. We're talking about boilers that are running at 96 to 98% efficient, so very efficient. The HVAC systems are modern. Everything has variable frequency driven fans and pumps. So speed of equipment is based on the load of a building and the CO2 within the building. And then moving down the line, we have air source heat pumps coupled with VRF. And VRF is very common right now. It's very popular. There's variable refrigerant flow. And so what this is, for people who may not understand, it's a large commercial institutional version of ductless split systems that you see in homes and offices. And I'll go into a little more detail in the next couple of slides. But then we have geothermal water-cooled heat pump coupled with VRF. Then we have geothermal water source VRF, air-to-water heat pumps with energy recovery units and chilled beams, and geothermal heat pumps with energy recovery units and chilled beams. So as you can see, there's a lot of variations on the same theme. And when we do these life cycle costs, we distill it down to a savings. And the system that shows you the best savings is really the preferred system that should go into the school. And
Now,
we use a program
can
called the VLC.
Wayne, can I jump in here?
Yep.
So one thing that we're doing the comparison on this is, this is assuming that the energy source is a stable price. So meaning that right now, right now, 70% of the electricity made in Massachusetts is made by natural gas and then sold. So they use natural gas to make the electricity, then they sell it. That's assuming that the energy, the electric costs will stay the same when you do all these comparisons, correct?
So when we do the comparisons, we do build in escalation factors into not only the construction cost, but also the energy cost. Now, again, these values come from the Energy Information Agency.
Right,
So
and that's where I pulled my information. So one of my
Exactly right.
concerns that I wanted to bring up is with the electrification that is coming along, So a concern that I have is right now electricity is at a certain cost. 17% of the electricity is from solar or renewables in
Right.
Massachusetts right now. We import two-thirds of our electricity from out of state. I get that from that same energy. So one of my concerns is if we start to use a lot of electricity, because now they're asking residents or requiring residents to use it, is that electric cost going to stay stable? Or is it going to be like supply and demand, where all of a sudden the electricity becomes more in demand and it becomes more costly? So that's something that I want to make sure that we're at least going to this open-eyed, assuming that there may be changes in the cost of natural gas, but there also may be changes in the cost of electricity.
Yeah, and that's a great point you bring up, and that's one of the things that we struggle with. Myself and the team I work with here, we have these discussions daily about energy costs, about natural gas versus electric, and to be honest with you, we actually have two projects just over the state line in Rhode Island, where we did a very detailed life cycle cost study, just like this one here, where high efficiency gas-fired boilers with chilled beams and demand control ventilation just won out just slightly, had the lower life cycle cost. So you can see that from my point of view, for what I designed, each one of these systems I show here, they have the same challenges and benefits to designing them. So we don't have a preferred way to say, hey, we designed this system the same way every time, and that's how we make money. Doesn't work that way for us. It's design one system is just as easy as the other. But we do have to watch the energy cost, because as we go to electric, and I think you probably saw the same thing, not to go into an environmental rabbit hole here, but almost 30% of electricity is still actually that we're buying is still produced by coal even. So there's some value to looking at that. So in any case, when we do this life cycle cost, and they are reviewed by an energy modeler, we do team up with an energy model on all these projects. They'll see our numbers too. So there is some kind of oversight on this. As my father used to say, the figures don't lie, but liars can figure. We do have oversight so that we don't just do this thing blindly. So that's how we distill to the system that we get. And then Chris, if you jump down to the next slide. One of the systems that you see at a lot of schools now that's electrically based is the variable refrigerant flow system. This kind of illustrates kind of how it works. The areas with the blue arrows, those are areas that are calling for cooling. The areas that are red are calling for heating. And what happens is the areas that are calling for for cooling, heat is extracted from those sets of rooms, and they provide the heating source for rooms that are adjacent. And the system consists of ceiling cassettes or ducted fan coils that you don't see. You'll just see normal diffusers. It's all interconnected refrigeration piping that runs outside to a group of air-cooled condensing units. And a couple slides down, I'll show you a picture of what they look like. You've seen them; they're everywhere now. This is technology that was invented in the 1940s in the United States, heat pump technology. We kind of moved away from it in this country. The Asian markets took over, where they don't have a lot of gas supply over there. The Japanese really have developed this, and it's taken off, and now we've kind of readopted it as one of the more common systems that you would see. And then
yeah, we do a lot of the city multis, the Mitsubishi city multis, and they're great. So like I say, I mean, I can see the advantages to everything, and just we just want to make sure we're thinking it through.
Yeah, and one of the things we have to think about too that's not discussed in this presentation is at the end of this year, we're going through a refrigerant change now. We're leaving the R410A refrigerant, and everybody's moving, industry-wide is moving over to an A2L refrigerant, which is like R454. So it has different characteristics. It has very low flammability. It is still non-toxic, but it is causing a change in the thinking, and refrigeration codes are being updated as far as the use of that refrigerant. So your schools right now anything that's going to be built after 2024 is going to go to the refrigerant. So we have to evaluate the efficiencies and the capacity that goes along with those new refrigerants. Not to go too far into the weeds, but this slide here just kind of illustrates one of the systems that you would see. And then Chris, if you don't mind jumping to the next one down. And I throw this slide in here because geothermal is talked about a lot, and I just want people to understand how geothermal. I don't presume that everybody understands HVAC or our system. So when we talk about geothermal, what that really means is you use the ground as a heat sink. So in the summertime, heat from the building is rejected through a heat pump cycle, and that heat is rejected into the ground. And then in the wintertime, when you want to heat your building, the ground has a very stable temperature that ranges anywhere from 50 to 60 degrees. You extract that heat out of the ground through a heat pump, and that's rejected into your building. It sounds great, but it's still electrically based. It's a fairly expensive system. It requires what we call wells. They're not wells in the sense of water wells for drinking and domestic use, but they're boreholes that are about 10 inches diameter that range in 500 to 1,000 feet deep. And each one of those boreholes really only produces about 7 to 7.5 tons of heating or cooling. So you would need a lot of those. And there is a cost associated with that. And the Inflation Reduction Act is paying 30% of this type of a system. And so you have to evaluate these carefully as you look at.
Now on that, Wayne, so I've also done those also. So you have basically, we did 1,000-foot well, or as far down as they could go.
Yep.
But you also have bleed off water you have to deal with. The pump has to run 24/7 because that's how it extracts the energy. It basically goes through a compressor, which gets to the water source heat pump, which pulls out the energy out of it. So that's another electric motor. All of these things also will have a life cycle. So, we did it where the main pump, which was driving the well, burned out. And that also has a life cycle because they run basically year round, meaning off and on, year round when there's a demand for heat or cooling.
That's right. They do run year round, and the pumping energy is pretty substantial because you're talking about moving water through multiple wells for 75 tons of cooling heat. You're talking 10 wells that are 1,000 feet. So you get 10,000 feet actually 20,000 feet of piping because you're going down and back up across your field into your building. So you have to look at the pumping energy that's involved. And those pumps do run continuously. And those pumps for the school the size of Millis could be 60 horsepower pumps that are running continuously. So that information also gets built into the life cycle cost to drive you to a certain system.
They also have the bleed off because when the wells get too overloaded with either heating or cooling, then they also bleed the water off of them to get water replenished from the aquifer.
So the geothermal system, I'm glad you brought that up. So the geothermal system that we've been using is called a standing column closed loop. So it's I don't have a picture of it in the slide, unfortunately. I didn't really go too far into this, but it's a pipe within a pipe. So we actually don't use any water from the ground, nor do we put any water into the ground. What it is the pipe is a pipe within a pipe. So it's like a long vertical heat exchanger where water from the building goes down the center pipe, and then the water flows back up the outside of the pipe and extracts heat or rejects heat into the ground surrounding it. So there's no cross-contamination of the heating system water and the groundwater, nor do we have to replenish any systems. So it's kind of like an evolution of what you're discussing. But yeah, smaller systems, residential systems, small commercial systems is exactly what you just discussed is exactly what you see. Larger schools, we've gone a different route. Yep. Chris, next slide, please. And so this slide just illustrates the various pieces of equipment you would see on different projects. I just put a little diagram of the heat pump cycle for anybody who actually wants to, who can't sleep tonight and wants to see how the heat pump cycle works. You can study that diagram and try to stay awake when you do it. And then we have the outdoor unit as part of a city multi-system or the variable refrigerant flow. You would see groups of these around your building. And then we have the indoor unit with energy recovery. So touching base on what Chris was talking about before, regardless of the HVAC system that goes into the school, we would be using ventilation air brought in through an energy recovery unit. And that air would be delivered to a chilled beam, which would be an induction unit that would move air through the induction cycle. And the nice thing about it is the ventilation air goes into a classroom, say that that classroom requires 400 cubic feet a minute of air. That amount of air would be brought back out of the classroom, goes through the energy recovery wheel and thrown overboard. None of that air would be recirculated with other air from other classrooms. So it goes to great extents to prevent cross-contamination. Also, this unit, regardless of what type of HVAC system we would have, this unit would feature MERV 8 pre-filters, which filter pollen. It would have MERV 13 final filters, which can filter out even sneeze nuclei. So, any COVID strains, all that would be captured in those filters.
And just one more thing, Wayne, with that. So the
Yeah.
filter change on those. So those are almost up to number of 13 that's how close to HEPA is that?
That's a few steps below HEPA. So you would have 13, 15, 16, and then you jump to HEPA. So HEPA would be 99.99%.
Right.
No,
so the reason I ask is the filter changes are going to be something
Yeah.
that we'll need to consider.
Yeah.
Because if we have multiple units, we're going to have multiple filter changes. So that's just another thing. We'll have to determine the operating cost for those.
Yeah, so what we do on our units, and so generally speaking, we have MERV 8 pre, MERV 13 final. The MERV 13 will last generally a year in a school. And we've been following different school systems that we've worked with over the years and talked to the maintenance personnel. MERV 13 will last a year. MERV 8 will last 6 months. Okay, so you're doing 2 filter changes on MERV 8s, 1 filter change on MERV 13. MERV 8s are kind of what used to be called your almost your 30% filter, which was kind of a more standard filter. It's less expensive, so that filter protects the MERV 13 filter. So you're not replacing MERV 13s every 6 months. You're just doing the MERV 8s. And we also put on these units, we put air pressure sensors on them. So it records the filter loading. So if you see a filter is loading more slowly, you don't have to change it. The gauge will tell you how dirty that filter is getting based on the air pressure drop. As filter loads up with dirt, the air pressure drop increases. So there's controls we put in to prevent you from wasting money on filters, because that can be expensive, So jumping down, Chris, to another slide. We talk about air source heat pumps a lot, and they come in all shapes and sizes. The VRF system that we were talking about earlier, and then we have, these are packaged units. The one on they look like normal rooftop units that you see anywhere, any building, any school, except they, instead of having a hot water and a chilled water coil, they would use the heat pump cycle. They have energy recovery components built into them. On the diagram on the right there, the cutaway view, you can see the segmented wheel on the right-hand corner of the unit. And what that does is air being exhausted out of the building, that wheel rotates, and it's got a material that's plastic base that absorbs heat and moisture. So the outgoing airstream in the winter, that captures the heat of the air being exhausted. That wheel rotates into the fresh airstream, and then air being brought in captures that heat or the latent energy to be delivered to the building. It's an energy savings means of preheating and pre-cooling air to unload the central HVAC system. And regardless of whether it's a heat pump or hot water or chilled water, the principle still remains the same. So the equipment is very, 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 very similar. Any questions on this before I move along? And then the last slide I have coming up is I always like to talk about building zoning because it just kind of gives an idea of what people can expect to see in systems. So, in the mint green boxes are the gym, cafeteria, and the auditorium. Those areas would each be served by their own rooftop unit. They're a dedicated unit that provides all the heating and cooling for each one of those spaces. So each of these 3 green spaces, we each have its own dedicated unit, does all the heating and cooling for that space. It would have an energy recovery component for energy efficiency. It operates on what's called the demand controlled ventilation sequence, which is CO2 based. So as kids are in the spaces breathing, they produce CO2. Sensors on the wall indicate whether you need to bring more fresh air in the building, or you can get away with less fresh air as an energy savings method. And then, of course, the salmon color is in the existing building, the classroom section. That would be dedicated, served by dedicated rooftop units, which provide the ventilation. And then within the classroom, you would either have ceiling cassettes as part of a VRF system, or you would have chilled beams, which would be part of a more conventional hot water and chilled water system. So inside the building, the systems look fairly similar one way or the other. But the important thing to realize through all this is that anything we do, it is going to be the most efficient that we can provide for whatever type of system that we end up recommending through the life cycle cost. It will meet all the ASHRAE standard 62, which is the ventilation requires set by ASHRAE, and it will meet all the building codes, the International Mechanical Code, and it will be LEED compliant, regardless of whatever system we end up with in this building.
Chris, can I ask you a question? And because Wayne had talked about air conditioning. So the MSBA, I thought, had air conditioning was a no-no. They didn't allow that. Can you walk us through if that is still accurate or not?
That's not to my knowledge. We've done AC in whole and parts of buildings on schools, almost all of them for the last 5 years or 10 years.
Because when Clyde Brown, I thought we talked about that they didn't allow that for some reason.
I think it's an option you can choose. I don't think they have a policy position on it, but Mike or Jeff, do you have a?
Yeah, they don't have a policy or position on it. Back then it was a cost. So when you're looking at the overall cost of the project, they cap out the dollars per square foot of the project. So when you're adding in air conditioning as an element, it's all on the town's dime. And so I think, 5 to 10 years before, we were always looking at putting that sparingly in the admin areas and then places that were used all summer long. Over the past 5 or 6 years, it's been getting more and more spaces. There's been different variations of that, such as, displacement air systems or air conditioning light. And Wayne can talk more to those different, models that are out there, but it's been shifting more and more to AC.
No, and that's fine. Like I said, that's what I remember from the Clyde Brown project. And I know that with the springs we've had and falls, it has been pretty hot. So yeah, and could you talk to us, Wayne, a little bit about the air conditioning light?
Yeah. So yeah, AC light is we also call it a tempered air system. And the easiest way to think about that is think of your classrooms as being fully air conditioned up until June 20th, for example. So classrooms would not be fully air conditioned. What I mean by fully air conditioned, they don't have full air conditioning on the 95-degree day at the end of July or August. So if it was 91 degrees outside on July 30th, the inside of your classroom, if it's lightly loaded and based on high performing envelopes, the temperature inside your classroom is still going to be 75 to 78 degrees. However, it's going to be 50% relative humidity because the rooftop unit's going to handle the humidity regardless of the AC. So you're getting the benefit of a drier space, which gives you the opportunity to have a couple degrees warmer than you would. Now, your administration area, your library, and your student dining, that's going to be full air conditioning year round because you have people in the admin year round. Student dining generally becomes community use spaces, and the auditorium, while it's an auditorium, that has year round use, as a community space as well. And so a lot of the schools that we've done, and they've been very successful, people actually don't even realize they're not air conditioned, is that you can scale back the amount of air conditioning you put into the building by just modifying the amount of cooling, the amount of BTUs. And so some schools, even for example, they don't need all the classroom fully air conditioned in summer, but they're going to have a wing dedicated to summer school where they do want air conditioning. And the systems that we design are modular in nature where, okay, the A wing is fully air conditioned. That's going to be dedicated to the summer school program. The library is going to remain fully air conditioned. And then the B and C wings could be tempered. Or the community may opt They go fully air conditioned because they expect that school programs are gonna drift into the summer in the future. And we do build into our life cycle cost study the tempered versus full air conditioning, so you'll get to see those numbers as well.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, so we've done that tempered air in a few recent projects, and we had a hot September, and we can get testimonials of how those users, even this past year, really enjoyed that. And I think it's much better than going to full tilt to air conditioning.
Yeah, it is. It's smaller ductwork. It's less air being moved. It's which saves on fan power, saves on installation costs on smaller systems. And when we were heavily involved in the model school program and the MSBA a few years ago, I think at least half, Marshfield High School, East Bridgewater, Somerset Berkeley Regional High School, and Franklin were all tempered air systems. Some of those buildings have now been running for 10 years, some for 5 years. And people are very happy with it. We've done them in Rhode Island and in a brand new school in East Providence. So it is a really good option to look at to save some cost.
Well, the other thing is if the unit runs all the time, it dehumidifies. So it just by running, it may not get the temperature down, but it's the same time as you working as a big dehumidifier.
Yeah, because the rooftop unit does the, when you get cooling, you get the sensible component, which just change the temperature. And you get the latent component, which is removing moisture. The rooftop unit does that latent component. It removes the moisture for the air. And in effect, it's like the old joke about, going to Las Vegas in the summertime. They say, well, it's a dry heat. Well, there is some truth to that. When the air is dry, you perspire, you get some evaporative cooling effect. So anyway, not to go into bore you guys to tears.
Wayne, I think you and I had a phone conversation. This might be something that the committee would appreciate, but you and I were talking about on a recent project where you guys were starting to design systems that might have a gas-fired component to it, but you design it in such a way that it can be easy, take that term with a grain of salt, but it can be swapped out for an electric-based component of the same type without having to redo the entire system of the building. Can you give a little bit of background on that just to give some point of clarity?
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, it's pretty cool stuff. So in the school like you used to, you have a boiler room that has a bunch of boilers lined up, 4 boilers, let's just say, and then you have an air-cooled chiller outside that's making chilled water for air conditioning. And so what's happening now is there's manufacturers, they make air-to-water heat pumps, and they extract the heat out of the air, it goes through the heat pump cycle, and that heat is put into the water that's circulated around the building. So if we were to design your building with conventional boilers, and in the rest of the building outside the boiler room is a conventional HVAC system, whether it's displacement or chilled beam or VAV, in 10, 15 years down the road, when there's better incentives to convert over to electricity, you just remove the boiler component out of the building and you put in the air to water heat pump in place of that boiler in the building. The pumps, the piping, the circulating system, the air handling units, the chilled beams, and the displacement diffusers, that all remains the same. None of that stuff downstream changes. You're just changing the energy source from natural gas to electricity. And that is something that we're kind of pursuing because we do have clients that say, well, we can't afford to go all electric right now. Operating costs are crazy. Air to water heat pumps are about 10 times the price of a boiler. We're going to go boilers to start with, and down the road, if this electric thing we're forced into that because our community's gone to the opt-in code, or we have some other issues while we want to go all electric, you're only switching out a small portion of your whole building. And it's in the boiler room, so it's not affecting classrooms, administration, libraries, auditoriums, cafeterias, things like that. So that's something that is always keep in mind. If we end up the life cycle cost shows, or we're going to go natural gas, you can change over down the road. I think I explained it clearly.
No, that's great. Thank you. No, I get it 100%. Thanks.
Yeah. I know I like talking about this stuff, but then I look at spaces like, I'm probably the only guy in the room who likes this stuff.
I think at least John Engler appreciates the outcomes of the discussion. So, okay. So one of the things we wanted to do tonight, and this doesn't have to be, you know, a forever decision that you can't ever rethink, but one of the cost impacts for something like the PSR estimates or the upcoming SD estimates is going to be strategy on HVAC. I wrote HVAC here, but really what I'm meaning by this is, do we think this committee or this town has any wherewithal to try to include something like geothermal, or really geothermal's the conversation here, because outside of that, all of these systems will be, you know, there'll be cost differences and premiums, and Wayne's going to do that analysis for the life cycle cost, and we're not asking you to pick the system for PSR. But if we're going to carry some cost item for, say, geothermal or something like that, if that seems attractive or whatever, I'd like to sort of kind of get that provisional strategy in motion now, so that we can identify that as part of the PSR process, both in terms of cost, but also where the equipment goes, where the fields might go and stuff like that, the wells. And so I guess I kind of leave that to discussion of the group, and what we should be thinking about in terms of strategy. You could say we're going to table that completely, or whatever, but I at least want to see if there's any wherewithal to have that conversation at all tonight.
Well, I'd like to start off that I think that the upfront cost of the geothermal is going to be a problem, because that's going to add, you know, even though we'll get incentives at the end or whatever payback it is. I asked we put a geothermal system in on one of my projects, and I asked the engineer, I said, when's the payback for the money that the client spent on the geothermal? And he wouldn't give me an answer. You know, that may have changed now, but I think right now it's a large cost. It will be hard to push that through and get the building itself, which is really the important thing, is to get the building built. I think if we add another, you know, hill to get up and over, I think that wouldn't be serving us well. That's my opinion, and I want to hear others. So, anyone interested in commenting?
I'll comment. It's Denise. I totally agree with everything you said, Rich. I think cost is a challenge for us, and absorbing a cost, adding this on, and I think we would be unsuccessful in trying to justify and validate the additional cost upfront, even with the reimbursement eligibility and the time or cost that it might save down the road. I think the down the road we'll lose folks with the price tag, and we won't be able to. I just don't think the recoup of the money, the investment, happens fast enough, and we're already a bit challenged on the pricing side as it is. So I don't think that we could absorb that if we don't have to. If we have a choice to not do it, then I would opt to not do it.
Okay, Jeremy.
Yeah, Rich. Yeah, I tend to agree too. And with a long payback period, before you get, you know, net benefit, we're just upping what we're asking for in an exclusion, in a debt exclusion, and then those savings, right? Those energy savings are stuff that's already inside of Prop 2.5, so that money's going to get eaten up somewhere else within the school or town budget. So we're not really going to see any sort of savings to a taxpayer. It's just going to be a higher bill, and then those, I guess the savings would be maybe a possible avoidance of a future additional operational override. But I think that's a poor frame, and if you're explaining it that much, you're losing. And I think to try to include that into a debt exclusion override a few years after an operational override is a losing proposition.
Yeah, anyone else?
Yeah, me.
Go ahead.
I think that everything that's been said so far is accurate. I fear a large cost like geothermal could force the voters to reject the whole project. Too much money. That's it.
All right, good. Well, thank you. All right,
Great.
so go ahead.
Well, I
Mr.
think,
Yeah, go ahead.
yeah,
Chris.
I was just gonna say that I think that's clear, from this committee at least, and if you get, if you hear things on the street or otherwise that would suggest that we need to rethink that decision, you do have time to do that, but for now, we will understand that as a provisional strategy, as I keep calling them in quotes, provisional strategies to say, we won't pursue the sort of geothermal investigations or whatever for this project at this time. And PSR is going to go in without any of that thinking in it.
And then one thing that I do want to bring up is that we do have an energy director, that I think in the rest of the conversation, I think we do want to get him to at least come and talk to us about that. So Bob Weiss, who's the energy director, was interested in coming and talking to us about that. So I think if, since we've made a decision, it's not geothermal, and it seems like we have a couple of other options that Wayne could work on. I think we should get Bob in here at least to walk through maybe if there's something we're missing.
That sounds great. Rich and Jeff and Mike, do you guys want to set that up, or do you want us to reach out, or how do you want to?
We can, he's ready to come. He'd be here tonight. So he's ready to go.
I can facilitate setting up a meeting with him.
All right. Thanks, Mike. Appreciate that. And we can do one before this, but we can do one anytime with our team and then come and do it with this group as well. So just, we're open to that, however that goes. So
and maybe we could do it during a working meeting or something and tie him in, because we'd like to be involved with that also.
Sure.
So.
Makes sense. Okay, with that, I'm going to keep going on. I'm going to jump into some renovation options and scope. I don't know if anybody needs any kind of bio break or anything.
I was thinking the same thing.
So maybe we take 5 and then get back to it. Is that?
That sounds
or 2?
good.
Take 3
okay
as fast as you can.
Bye-bye.
We'll take a quick 3-minute break, and I'll see you guys back at 9:15. I'll start up.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Welcome back. So next section, we're going to talk about options that you have in terms of renovation scope. And this is something Jeff and Mike were asking that we sort of start to get a little bit more clarity on, and show you guys where you have options and what we think is going to end up being required. Some of that we just talked through on the envelope side, on the outside. Some of it we just talked through in terms of HVAC. And so jumping right in, what I really wanted to get at with this slide is that we have a few givens relative to renovations and scope. That is new HVAC throughout. Wayne just talked about that. We'll hone in the actual final, selection on that as we get into schematic design. You're going to have new electrical wiring throughout because the wiring is old, and that includes things like fire alarm communications and controls, where you need the faster speeds and gigabits and stuff like that, and the new code regulations for fire alarms. It includes new lighting throughout, which is essentially a requirement nowadays with LEDs and controls for lighting. There are other solutions, but LEDs really where everything's at. You're gonna have probably new flooring throughout. I wrote here that some is required. I'd say probably that term "some" should be more like mostly required, but this is a scope adjustable item. The district or the committee could say, hey, there's a room there that we are able to keep, and I'll show you those diagrams in just a minute, but there's a room that we might be able to keep unaffected. We'll change the HVAC and the lighting, put a new coat of paint in, but the floor can stay, right? We'll just put a new coat of finish on it or something, and then we can do new flooring elsewhere. If that's something that turns out that we need to do for value engineering reasons. I would think that we're probably going to be painting mostly everywhere. And I just want to reiterate, the top of this slide says renovation options and scope. I'm not really getting into some of the nitty gritty on new construction because new construction is new construction and everything's new and we have to do it all. So this is really just about scope options, scope adjustable decisions that you can make in renovation. So new paint, new ceilings throughout. I think this is probably going to be a mostly required, if not all, but it is another spot where you can do scope adjustable, even with things like HVAC throughout. You can have a contractor carefully pull ceilings out, store it, and then replace the ceilings where they were. And that is something that's doable, but somewhat challenging. So really, I wanted to talk through a few things. There's 3 planes of renovation. There's the floor, the ceiling, and the walls. In here, you can kind of see them. John, I'm getting that feedback. In here, you can sort of see those planes. I don't really need to go over it all, but there's just a graphic way to represent that. And so what I wanted to talk through for a few minutes is on the renovation side. We do have some level of optioning that we can run through. So AR1, option AR1, which you've seen in various forms previously, is a robust response to the program and vision of the building. This is really pushing hard at the 21st century education model. This is really pushing hard at a lot of those things that are coming up in visioning, in all of that sort of new formation of the building, or sort of what the building can be, blue sky ideas. And so on the scale of applicability to the educational vision, this one is a high-ranking candidate for that. However, in doing that, we basically gut the building. It means all the walls are coming out. We're rebuilding all these walls. It creates a lot of scope, but the end result is basically it's going to feel like a new school. It's going to be completely different than what you have, and enable things to occur in different ways than what you already are doing. This is the first floor. You can see everything that's in red are new walls. Everything that's not in red are existing walls. And so unless it is surrounded by the sort of addition circle, and then that's all new. But you can kind of start to get a sense of what we're talking about here. And I think that when you boil down to this, it's just, it feels expensive, right? It's like, it's a lot of work. And so then we took a deeper dive on what are the variations to that. And this is, I took AR4 and 4A and looked at the idea of, I'll go back one, at this furthest wing, which was the most recent dated part of the building, including some portions over here and on the back of the gym. But this was a few years after the original build. These classrooms just happen to be slightly smaller, but enough smaller that it makes this portion of the building more sort of more of a candidate to keep. And so I took a look at AR4 and 4A and really tried to get down to where can I get the most bang for our buck, and still trying to achieve mostly those visioning things. So one of the things to keep in mind is that the visioning is sort of a guide and a roadmap to how buildings should be laid out. And then you pair that with the MSBA's template, which is a pretty hard and fast rule on sizes of space. So that gives you the square footage of classrooms that ranges between 850 and 950 square feet per room. But it doesn't tell you how to arrange those. So the educational vision is a tool that we use to say, well, what's the ideal arrangement of those rooms to accomplish the pedagogy that you're trying to do in the building, teaching and learning. And this is trying to still achieve some of that. It doesn't do it as well as the previous version, but still captures those spaces that are in the space template and really hits. These classrooms are a little bit varied in size, but they are all in that range of sort of high 800s to low 900s. And that does work for the MSBA's template, but visioning side, it's a little bit less ideal. And one of the scenarios you can see with that is that you've got what I'm calling like a 9th grade wing. It could be anything, but you have a 9th grade wing and you've got your sort of team down here, but then the science room is sort of way at the end of the hall, right? Not a big deal. That's not, you know, a mile down the road, but the sort of teaming arrangement of corridor breakouts and stuff like that, it doesn't do the same thing that the other one did. But the result is on the first floor here, you can see that we have a potential to arrive at really only building 12 new walls. Some of them are longer than others, but you get the point. 12 new locations instead of everything being new. And on the second floor, it's even less. We got to a place where I feel comfortable saying I'm meeting the MSBA's template. I'm meeting the program for a high school, but we're not completely, you know, throwing everything out and starting over. So there's a lot of challenges to this. There are some benefits, and not just in walls, but as Jeff keeps reminding us that, you know, in any of these rooms like this one down here that you can keep, you're not only keeping the walls, but you may be able to keep the ceiling grid. You may be able to keep fire protection. You may be able to keep the floor or other things. So there's other add-ons that make it not just a scenario about what walls you build and which ones you don't. But there's follow-on things that come out of this conversation that are beneficial. Then we have sort of the fourth one, which is a blended option between AR1 and AR4, which is just saying maybe that same AR1 idea happens in the AR4 version, which you know, we would sort of chase that around and see where we could go with it, but maybe it's somewhere in between the two. And I think that one, in some ways, it's like you go all the way, or you go as short of a distance as you can, and like the middle ground, unless some of these spaces like this breakout zone for teaching and learning and teams becomes really the driver, then I think that's where we would have to lean on the educational team of you know, the district and central office and admin to really guide us on what's most important in terms of that visioning. And so so that's where we are. I don't know if there's a real solid decision point here, but I do think it's worth the committee talking about the pros and cons or asking questions in your eyes around this, because that conversation will help guide the rest of our development of PSR and the options that come out of that in terms of the approach for the renovation scope. And so, you know, I would appreciate if you all could take 5 or so minutes and just sort of banter around talking about the pros and cons. I can keep the slides up or let you just have the screen for cameras, but I think it would benefit our team if I could just get that conversation a little bit here.
Chris, could I ask the first question? And
Yep.
you know what question I'm going to ask? It's hard for us to make a decision not knowing what the costs are. Is one cost with gutting, you know, with a more gutting, is that 20% more? Is it 50% more? That's you know, that would be my question, is I need to know you know, when we make a decision, how much is it going to hurt? And then beyond that, I think the design goes back to the school. That, you know.
I agree.
Yeah, so I did some preliminary costing, and I think that I think the middle ground option was, so obviously this option here is if you said that's your baseline, then this first option was basically double that. And then this option here was like somewhere in the middle. So, and that was just based on square footage of walls. I don't want to throw the numbers out because I think it's a little bit misleading, because I think that when you gut, you have all of that follow-on stuff around sprinklers and all that stuff. But I will tell you that you're also not talking, you're talking you know, this one is 50% less than the other version, right? But even in that conversation, you're talking about an order of magnitude that is probably at its most expensive level with walls and probably some other savings. I mean, I'd be comfortable saying you're talking an order of magnitude of $500,000 or something like that versus 250,000 or something in that range, right? So when you talk about a $80 million project, or whatever the number is, this decision is not, it is critical because we need to get it right and we need to show that we're being responsible with the building, but it's not the one that's going to be, we just saved $3 million by this decision.
So
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I agree. So then what I would say on that is that, and that's kind of what I thought. I mean, the things that you're talking about moving or getting rid of or adjusting aren't necessarily the big ticket items, not to discount, spending money. However, like you said, if we're redoing it, and we get it part way of what we needed or wanted, it doesn't necessarily make any sense. So then I would bring that back to the school. And I saw Bob was back because he's my first one to go to. So Bob, what was your thought on that?
Yeah, I think, just reduce, just having the same layout with like slightly bigger rooms so we can keep the same walls. I think that's a missed opportunity. We've talked a lot about collaborative space, utilizing breakout rooms, small group rooms and things like that. To me, this is our opportunity. I'm kind of glad to hear you say, Chris, in the scheme of things, it's not the biggest driver. Because I really do think it's important that, the new facility supports all the things that we know are good for education in the 21st century and almost mirroring what our kids are going to see in the workplace, team rooms and areas like that, breakout rooms. So, and Anna and Mark, feel free to chime in.
And to follow up on your comment, Bob, I mean, I agree with you. I think the thing is, if we go ahead and do all this work and then we don't get the inside the right way, I agree. I think it's a missed opportunity.
Yeah.
I don't have my, were there any other comments? I don't know if anybody had.
No, not that I can't see.
Expand my other window here. So, okay, well, I think what I'm hearing is, if I see shaking heads, I'll feel confirmed by this, but I think what I'm hearing is that, the program and vision for the inside in terms of educational pedagogy, should be the driver, but let's not just willy-nilly go in and toss it out if it doesn't have to be tossed out. And so I think it's like, be careful, but also don't be constrained. And I think that I wanted to have this conversation partly because one of the comments, I think it was on one of the Post-it notes, or might have been just a verbal comment from the public forum, was we don't need all these bells and whistles in the school. We just need, like almost the mentality of, it was good enough for me when I went to school. Why is it not good enough now? And I think that this conversation is a good hallmark, and even these slides are a good hallmark to say, this talk about 21st century education, why it can feel like bells and whistles, it actually doesn't affect the bottom line of cost when you're going at renovation at the clip that you're looking at for here, as much as people might have think it affects the bottom line, right? The other big picture things affect it greatly. This does affect it, and I think we'll be as responsible as we can in that response. But at the end of the day, all this hard work on the educational program and the vision and all that stuff really is the driver. And I think if this committee is basically confirming that with this analysis, then I feel like then that's enough of a conversation for me. And I don't know if Mike or Jeff have any other comments they want to add to that or not, but I think that's where we kind of need to get for tonight.
Yeah, I think that's right, Chris. I mean, that's the conversation I wanted the community to have, really to understand the trade-offs, the opportunity costs, and I think you stated that very well, Chris, that, the pedagogy of the educational program is the driver, but be conscious about where we can save some money along the way. And it was worth this deeper dive to have the conversation with the community tonight to just see what those trade-offs are and to get their real-time feedback so that the design team can refine options moving forward.
Yep. Okay.
Chris, we made your job pretty easy. We cut out a whole option. We've given you a whole bunch of information. You guys will be done early.
I'm about to ask you to cut another option, so we're not done yet. You don't have to do that, but all right. So I'm still sharing my screen, right? Okay, so we talked about that. Okay, so recap on PDP is that we are studying R1, N1, which are essentially required inclusions for the MSBA based on policy. We have heard, I think, very clearly from this committee that cost is a driver of feeling like what we can get across through the community. Tonight, we have taken AR3 off the list. We'll go into PSR with R1, N1. In a few weeks, we're going to ask you to narrow all of this down to one preferred option. We're not doing that tonight. We had very few votes for AR1 at the public forum. We had most votes for AR4 and fewer votes for AR4A than we did for AR41. So it was 2, 3, and then all the rest on A4. And so, I think it's wise for us to keep going. AR1 does present a slightly different approach than AR4 and 4A. And you guys can make that decision at a later date. Originally, I was going to see if AR1 was still on the table, but I won't force that or ask for that. But that's where we are right now. And so I wanted to show you AR1, AR4, and 4A in a little bit more depth at a bigger scale. If anybody wants these at a larger scale, we can print them out and you can study them on your own. Just ask me and I'll make sure I get them to Millis one way or another. But this is AR1 and this is the first floor. And really you can start to see this one's further along with furniture and things than the other ones are, but that'll be remedied by the time we talk next. We'll have furniture layouts and other things to show you some of the programming aspects of that. But this version of this option in its current state really models after where the visioning and programming efforts have taken us. And so we need to keep tweaking this to make sure it jives with the space summary and template. But for all intents and purposes, this really represents the sort of teaching and learning that we understand the district is after. This conversation tonight will spur the next round of development. This is the second floor of that. But in terms of AR4, this conversation tonight will spur the next round of development. We'll all start to take these strategies from this renovation idea and weave them into this portion of renovation only. I don't think it's going to look exactly the same. You'll start to see some different approaches in here. But I was waiting for this conversation tonight to really understand if I was driving at what you see on the screen now or the previous one. And I think it's going to be more like the previous one, but probably somewhere in between a little bit. But really the thing to focus your attention on really tonight is the clarity that we've been driving at on the addition part, which is everything to the south and east of the building. So it's the new gym, the new cafeteria, kitchen, back of house, and then a middle school wing over here. And so we've really been able to put scale to that. It's hard lined, it's all the right sizes. And so you know, this is starting to be how it shakes out. The next meeting will show you some massing models to show you sort of more three-dimensionally extruded how this is looking. But you're starting to see us sculpt and shape space. In particular, you're kind of seeing some things develop out here, which I'm hoping we can get a nice little entry zone plus sort of outdoor seating and plaza area to sort of get at some of that community aspect and outdoor learning and things like that. And then, yeah, you're starting to see the reorientation of the school where we can have like a new front entry on this side for middle school and high school. And so this building really starts to end up having multiple faces, multiple fronts. And I think that's an interesting development for the building because currently it's, aside from the little sheltered thing up here next to Clyde Brown, it's really like, where is the main part? So,
Chris, one question for you, when you're doing all these, you know, I know you're bulking out the rooms and everything, but I mean, the one point that was brought up, that was driven home pretty clearly was the community access to the building. So in your development there, you're figuring out a way to, you know, we need to be able to let people in and then also lock down, you know, so there's no access. Because I think that was something that didn't quite make it as far as people had expected in the Clyde Brown. And, you know, I don't think we could miss that target again.
okay. Yeah, I think that's kind of baking out into this idea here. So it's we'll show that with clarity, I think, as we go forward. I guess I want to, not now, but eventually maybe on one of the working groups, I want to hear more about the sort of not flushed out version of that for Clyde Brown, just so we understand where that comes from. So,
okay.
Okay, and then this is the second floor of AR4. So AR4A is, if you remember, it's the one where we're keeping the cafeteria. In this option, I'm suggesting we make a new back of house element here with the superintendent's office. And then I think that, to Rich, your point about public entry, I think that becomes somewhere on this side, which is where the parking lot is. It also puts the superintendent's office in an easier sort of recognizable spot. And then a new gym, which has adjacency to the fields. I kind of like that idea. The one previously, it being up here, is fine too. It's just a little bit further away from locker rooms and things like that. So, so those are just some of the nuanced differences between the two. And then you can see a little bit different expression for the middle school wing. The thing about these two options is that you can say something like, oh, well, we really like the middle school wing here, but we like the gym up there. And so we need to merge 4 and 4A, and that becomes the preferred option or something else. Like, so it doesn't have to be necessarily one or the other. But what I was trying to do with this one was say, it's just a different way to do that teaching pedagogy of neighborhoods, which are neighborhoods and teaming, which in the middle school level is a really prominent way to teach that curriculum. So I was trying to think, what if you had these zones separated with teams and then a little hub in the middle, and then another team and a little breakout hub where those teams can collaborate in and out of. And so I'm sort of thinking about the pressure that puts on a building and the organizational layout, and just trying to iterate through different models of that. So 4A has a little bit of a different version than 4, but again, you can interchange those, and then we'll do, again, the renovation portion here. And then you can see the other components down here that I was talking about. So different pros and cons of all of them. And we're going to keep working on those and get you some 3-dimensional massings. And so at the next meeting, we should have a little bit more to talk about and a bit of a more robust conversation on the pros and cons of each of these plans and layouts. And I think with that, I am actually out of content. So
I have a question for you, Chris.
Yeah. 4A
and 4, cost-wise, Can you compare?
I can pull that up. I don't have it like right in front of me, but let me try to get that and I can tell you what those were when we did them in PDP. Jeff or
give
Mike,
me
do
a
you have that
second,
right?
I'll-
Yeah,
Sorry?
okay. I was asking Jeff or Mike if they had it handy because I'm not
sure
Yeah,
they do.
it'll take me a minute to pull up, but
Michael Green. I
just give me a second.
think it was like $1 million and change maybe or something.
4 has the new components, the gym and the CAF,
Yep.
right? And
Four
4
has the big new part on that one that's different is new calf or no new calf.
right.
So, and 4 has the new calf, 4A does not.
And I had a
And Chris, am
question.
I remembering correctly? Oh, sorry, Bob, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Denise.
Just quick, if I'm remembering correctly, the new calf in 4 would be smaller than our existing calf because our existing calf is oversized based on the MSBA requirement.
Correct.
Okay.
So in terms of the range, there's about a $6 million delta between 4 and 4A.
Thank you.
With 4 ranging from 140 to 154, and 4A to 133 to 147. Those are our PDP numbers.
All right. Good question,
And I
Diane.
just
Thank you.
had a quick question on the locker rooms. Like if we move the gym, I think having the locker room separated from the gym is not good. If the gym is still down like this end of the building, but we're adding on a middle school, is that preventing the locker rooms from going right outside to the fields? Because I wouldn't want to see the football team coming in out of practice and having to go through hallways to get to the locker rooms. I don't think John would like that either.
Oh, where's the fun in that? Let me share. I'll show you. Okay, so this is second floor. So
That's the
4A, you can see my screen, right?
Yep.
So in this one, it's a little bit trickier to get, like here's the locker rooms here. So
Right.
it's a little bit trickier to go from here out to the field directly without going through this end of the middle school. But if you came out of the locker rooms this way, we could probably create a barrier so that they're coming out this way and around. It's sort of a long way around or out this way and around, or you could go through the gym. This isn't final, so we can
Yeah.
tweak this a little bit, but the thing that you have to keep in mind that I'm showing for reference is this dashed line, because this is the existing building right now. And if we build this addition, I need to keep a minimum distance away from that building just for constructability logistics.
Mhm.
And so you can't just say, well, let's just take the whole thing and slide it to the west.
Right.
And so it sort of does have a push and pull play on it. And I think that 4A complicates that a little bit, although the gym is in a little better condition, better space for that scenario. But on 4, where's 4?
You just had it.
Here, 4 first floor, right here.
Right there.
On 4 first floor, I think we have the ability to start to, it's sort of the same idea, but we can start to maybe take the back of house and reorient where that is or comes out a little bit further, and then create a little locker, create a door like right here that goes straight out or something. And so I think that there's ways to get around that. But yeah, I agree. We don't want to run the
Yeah.
football team or any other
I
team
agree.
through
The only,
middle
the only
school.
downfall on that is, Bob, is that you get the smaller cafeteria in this scenario.
Right.
Yeah.
I just the only saving grace of our locker rooms right now is they access right to the fields. Everything
Yeah.
else about them is horrible.
I think concur, but I think we can figure out a way to get you access
Okay.
through design iteration. I don't think this precludes it, and I'll take note of that and keep working on it. So.
Great, thank you.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and Chris, just one very quick question for you. I know in the schematics that you had there, you'd kind of laid out, and I think it's just maybe placeholders like 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th
Yeah.
grade. You know, and I just as a thought going forward, but one thing that we definitely want to be consistent with, and if we're thinking about how the classrooms are going to kind of get constructed along the way, is keeping things departmentally as opposed to grade leveled at the high school.
Sure.
So
Okay.
just in thinking about, you know, when you're putting science, when we're thinking about where
Yep.
science classrooms are going to go, and English and math, and just something to keep in mind as we go along.
That's super helpful. I appreciate that comment. I think we've maybe done with all the meetings, but we haven't officially seen all the final visioning documents. And so I was sort of waiting to understand if you wanted the ability to move, do something differently than departmental. But if you're declaring that departmental is what it's going to be, and that's the model, then yes, we can reorient this. And then what you'll end up seeing is probably a whole bunch of classrooms together, and then we'll group. Really the differential ones are the science labs, and so we'll just put all those together in some portion up or down, and I'll drop the sort of 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade component, and it'll just be all the classrooms are the same, and then you have the science and STEM rooms that are different. So
yeah, thanks, Chris.
Awesome. Yep.
All right, I think we're done with Chris. So if I know it probably saddens you, but if you want to take your adieu, thank you.
I'll wait. I'm part
Yeah,
of the
let
team.
him wait.
So-
Let's talk about schedule.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm part of the team, so I'm here.
He's got to suffer through. So, I think as far as meetings go, you know, we covered a lot with you guys tonight. You held up well, which is great. We were kind of on a 3-week cadence. I'm going to recommend a 2-week cadence. I think that we want to at least squeeze in one additional meeting between now and when we start to get the pricing step back. So right now, our next meeting on the books is the 22nd. And so if we went to a two-week cadence, we would add one on the 15th and then move the 22nd back to the 29th as an example. And then we would naturally then pick back up on the week of June 10th with our regularly scheduled meetings.
That's fine.
So I think for our next meeting, we'll hit on the building massing that Chris talked about, and then CM versus design bid build, and then some other items. It should be the quicker of the next 3 meetings, but I think it would help with progression.
So the 15th.
Yeah.
Okay. I could do the 15th. I don't know.
Rich, did you want to ask Terry about the solar recovery costs?
Not right now. We
Okay.
do, but he sent me a document which I didn't get a chance to read, Diane. But yeah,
Okay.
at 9:51, I think we could probably push that off to the next meeting.
Okay,
He needs to celebrate the Celtics. So are there any, knowing sort of what happened a little bit tonight, are there any conflicts anybody's aware of for the 15th or the 29th currently?
15th. When let's see, no, because town
It'll
meeting's
be
the 12th.
It'll be post-town meeting.
Right.
Right.
So the 29th.
So hopefully people's schedules ease up.
Yeah, I don't have anything.
Okay.
No.
That works for me.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
we'll
there's
do.
nothing on the town calendar for the 15th. I just looked, so.
Okay. I was doing the same thing, Kim.
And one other thing that maybe is open for discussion, maybe it isn't, but given the amount of data we're trying to translate to all of you, do we want to consider an earlier start time, like 7 or something like that, just to make it a little bit easier, or is that doesn't work for people?
I mean, we can. I guess we can. I mean, it just literally. I get home, I eat, and I was changing my shirt as I came up here. So for me, it's tough. I guess if it was for a couple meetings, I could probably do it. So, then we could go back to our regular time. So if you want to say yes for the next, 2 or 3, till we get to the submission thing, I think I could do that.
How does everybody else feel about? I was just throwing it on the table, and if it doesn't work, then it doesn't work. But
Yeah,
just love the feedback.
yeah, my previous communities, these types of meetings were much earlier, and I work from home on Wednesdays, so I have no dog in the fight whenever you guys want to start.
So what time would it be, Mike? What time would they start?
And we could start at 7. You know, it's a half an hour difference. So we might be able to get people, back to their sofas or something a little bit earlier. But
7's
just an
fine.
idea.
We'll do set. Why don't we do set? We'll do 7 for the next couple meetings.
Okay.
And then we could pop back to the 7:30.
He's just being kind to me with the playoffs.
All right, so 7 o'clock on the 15th and the 29th, and
Yeah.
then we'll switch back or reevaluate at that
Yeah.
point. Does that sound good?
Perfect.
Yep.
All right. So, Jeff, I think our next thing on the thing would be, we have invoices and meeting minutes.
Correct.
It looks like, I'm gonna do the low lying fruit. Well, I guess we'll do the invoice, first. So,
Do you want me to put those up?
I printed them because I'm old fashioned.
Okay, perfect.
He's the only one that can see him.
Yeah.
Would anybody else like me to put them up?
Oh,
on the
yeah, no,
screen?
should put them up. I was saying I'm gonna read that. Yeah. All right.
So the first one, we'll start with Tepe. Is that okay, Rich?
Yep. Yep, hold on. So I have, see if that's the same one. Yep. Okay, so I make a motion that we approve the amount of $71,442.43 for Tapi Architects, for the period ending on 4/6.
Second,
Right, motion's been made and seconded.
Period ending March 31st.
March 30. Oh, sorry, period. Well, the date was April 6th,
Yes.
sorry. Yeah, the services were through March 31st. So it's been made and seconded. I'll do it by roll call. Diane,
aye.
Denise,
Aye.
John. I think John's still here.
He might be muted. He had trouble on the computer, so he was not listening on the phone, but his phone was giving feedback, so I muted him.
Okay.
But he needs to unmute himself if he can.
All right, well, we'll go skip over to Jeremy. Jeremy,
Yes.
all right, and I'm an aye, so, and we'll assume John gave us a thumbs up. Because I can't see him, because I don't know if someone else can see him, but we'll say that passed. All right, next one, please.
Sorry, I was trying to see if I could find John. Okay, yeah, let me just scroll through these this was part of Taipei.
Yeah, I have Vertex for 19,000, if that's
Yeah.
our last one.
Let's put it up, yeah.
Yeah, perfect. All right, so I make a motion that we approve the invoice from Vertex for professional services through March 31st for the amount of $19,000.
Second,
All right, motion's been made and seconded. All in favor, Diane,
aye.
Jeremy,
Aye.
Denise,
Aye.
and John? No.
No.
All right, and I'm an aye. All right, motion passed.
Okay, and that was it for invoices. The minutes are from April 10th.
Yep, and so I make a motion that we approve the meeting minutes of Wednesday, April 10th as written. And we could do this by voice vote. Can I get a second?
Second,
All right,
Second.
motion's been made and seconded. All in favor? Aye.
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 Great. All right, good. Well, thank you. I think that was it. We did quite a bit tonight, so we still have a long way to go, but thank you for all the help, everybody.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion seconded. All in
Good
favor?
night.
All right, good
Good night,
night.
everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks so much, everyone.
All right, good night.
Ah, there it is.